The International African American Museum is the second largest museum dedicated to African American history and culture in this country. When visitors stand at the former Gadsden's Wharf, they will not only see artifacts and exhibits, they will walk where pain and perseverance changed a nation. Here is your first look inside this space that brings centuries together. Dr. Tanya Matthews, the museum's chief executive officer, says the story is layered and complex, so telling its history is done carefully.
We have several galleries trying to sort of tell the African American journey in context.
Dr. Matthews took us on a tour through the 46,000 square foot structure, showing and telling us why this museum will be a voice for untold and forgotten stories.
So when you first walk into the building, you'll see the transatlantic experience.
The Transatlantic Gallery consists of 8 digital screens telling stories, showing images from ancient civilizations in Africa to modern times.
You come through that gallery and then you end up in the Gullah Geechee Gallery. I would argue that every American history museum should have a little bit of Gullah.
And there is a lot of Gullah in the Gullah Geechee Gallery, a scaled-down praise house filled with the sounds of spirituals and the beloved Charleston handclap. A bateau commissioned by the museum sits broadly in the center of this space.
You go from there to African roots and routes, making a nice connection.
Dr. Matthews says the International African American Museum has 2 ways of thinking and delivering content. One is origin stories.
We go back to 300 BCE. We talk about the fact that human rice cultivation was recorded on the continent of Africa that far back.
The African Roots and Routes Gallery highlights modern African diasporic connections.
And then you leave that vibrant and alive gallery to enter one of our smallest and probably most powerful galleries. That is the Port of Departure. It's a very simple gallery, and it just contains names and ages of people who were enslaved.
From top to bottom and side to side, the names of enslaved adults and children obtained from recorded court cases. The Port of Departure Gallery has a sister gallery, the Port of Arrival.
There are still names, but these names are very American given. And these names come from our own records of plantations here in the Low Country.
In between these 2 galleries is the Atlantic World Gallery.
So the Atlantic Worlds Gallery is a mashup of African diasporic culture. You've got Haiti, Sierra Leone, Charleston, New Orleans, all of these places mixed up together. And part of what we're doing is making this deliberate connection.
The Atlantic World Gallery also explains why Charleston, why this port, why Gadsden's Wharf was so important in the transatlantic slave trade. Looking out the windows, the Atlantic Ocean, the connection that brought millions of enslaved people to Charleston.
Once you leave the Atlantic Worlds Gallery, then you step into Carolina Gold.
One of the things that differentiates the International African American Museum is that this museum tells the story of slavery through rice cultivation.
Many of us learn the story through cotton, but we talk about how this Carolina Gold was the cash crop here in the Low Country, ultimately making Charleston the richest city in all of the colonies.
Dr. Matthews says it wasn't just the labor, it was the knowledge, the know-how, and then the innovation of enslaved Africans that contributed to the wealth of the colonists.
As you come out of Carolina Gold, you will enter Carolina Connections.
Dr. Matthews says many of the stories associated with African American history in this country has origins in South Carolina, like the desegregation of America's schools. As we walk through the American Journeys Gallery,
This is actually from the 1800s.
Dr. Matthews explained this gallery includes modern touches of technology and contemporary art.
1400s all the way up to modern time. It's a giant U-shaped gallery, includes artifacts, also includes modern oral histories of folks that I think people here in the Low Country will recognize, telling their own stories of today.
Finally, the Center for Family History.
The Center for Family History is the size of one of our largest galleries, where we'll be staffed with genealogists and ancestry researchers to help anyone who's interested in learning a little bit more about their great-great-great-grands and the stories that they have to tell as well.
And beneath the museum,
our gardens are collectively referred to as the African Ancestors Memorial Garden. It was designed by a landscape architect by the name of Walter Hood, and everything is intentional. We have a black granite wall exhibition to help us honor and tell the story of a former storage house. But again, it's both trauma and joy, and that installation includes not only hunched figures that represent those we lost, but excerpts from Maya Angelou's poem, And Still I Rise.
Dr. Matthews says this tidal tribute pool is a place for reverence and reflection.
The waters in the pool are powered by a pumping system that raises and lowers the water with the tide. And at the bottom of that pool is an art installation of water, but also people, human figures, reminiscent of the way that Africans were packed into the bottom of slave ships. Right there on the edge, so you're looking at this pool and the Atlantic Ocean simultaneously. Our East Yard and our West Yard can hold hundreds of folks. And so we're just really excited about the kind of planning and gathering and I don't know, performing, cooking demonstrations that we could actually have in that space as well.
After 2 decades of planning, the purpose is realized. The International African American Museum tells the stories of how Africans and African Americans used intelligence, ingenuity, and insight to shape every aspect of the world. History is alive at the International African American Museum.
And of course, at the end of the day, I want an experience that compels you to tell someone else that you need to experience this, and can I go with you when you do, because I've got to go back.
From idea to opening, it has taken 2 decades to get to the opening of the International African American Museum. We take you to the heart of Charleston and inside this place where history is alive.
I want visitors to see a little bit of themselves, no matter what your background, no matter what your journey. This is our story, and I'm just very excited to learn what people take from what they learn inside the museum.